slowing in a synchronized fashion across the globe. But we do think that recession fears are overblown. So some of the worries that were started to price into markets in the late part of last year, we felt were a stretch. And the reason why we are not overly worried about recession risks at the current juncture is really that financial vulnerabilities are low. There are very little sign of excesses in the financial system, and there are also very limited indications only of inflationary pressures building up, even here in the US. And as a result, central banks, including the Fed, can take their time, can be patient in taking further steps towards policy normalization. And that gives the recovery some more room to run. Both monetary policy remains expansionary. In the US, it has become less expansionary than before, but all in all, it is still expansionary, as we show in the report. But also fiscal policy is supportive of economic growth. Here in the US, the size of the fiscal stimulus will decline in the course of the year, but all in all, it is still positive, albeit smaller than last year. In the rest of the world, however, we see a number of countries adding materially to fiscal stimulus and changing their fiscal policy. That is true for a number of European countries, and that's certainly true for China. So policies are supportive for economic growth and risk assets. What might be less supportive is politics. We show in the report and across our publications that geopolitical uncertainty, whether it is around trade tensions or around the tensions between the United States and China, are a factor that weighs materially on developed market equity markets. And we think that that is one of the key explanations for the weakness that we have seen last year. And while some of the trade policy tensions might temporarily abate, generally geopolitical tensions will likely stay high. So that's why politics might be a little bit less helpful than policies. One of the key factors that will determine this year, we think, is going to be for financial markets, but also for global growth, is the turnaround in the Chinese economy. I'll show you some charts that you have in the report that talk about where the data are at the moment. On an aggregated basis, they still speak of a pretty marked deceleration in Chinese activity. There are a number of data prints that are starting to be a little bit more encouraging, but on the whole, the data still come in weaker than the market expected, and still suggests that as we speak, the economy is still losing momentum. But we equally see that the Chinese government is taking very decisive steps to stimulate the economy, both on the fiscal policy side and on the monetary and financial policy side. And in our view, it's just a question of time until this will start to show in the economic data. So that's very important because this will have ramification for the rest of emerging markets, given the dependency on China. It will also have some serious ramifications for Europe, because Europe is much more open than the US economy to international trade, and some of the weakness that we see in European growth is clearly down to the deceleration in global trade. And so a turnaround in global trade global trade dynamics for which we need a turnaround in the Chinese economy will likely also help emerging markets and Europe to stabilize. So this is very important. And it's not easy to track. If you could look at, there is a chart in this document that is called Not So Soft Surprises in China Cushioned by Renewed Stimulus.
Thank you, Dr. Olga, for your forecast. You downplayed the fears of another financial crisis as it overblown, but you spoke of politics and geopolitics as not helping. This will lead me to ask you of protectionism approach taken by President Trump. Is it how you value that approach, and is it protectionism versus globalization? Which approach do you think is helping globally and nationwide over here in the United States?
Yeah, I think that concerns around free trade are not unique to the United States. You find similar concerns in other countries. So I think this warrants sort of a deeper analysis on what the reasons are behind it. And I think some of it has to do with the financial crisis, and that we have had very sluggish income growth for large parts of the population, which some of it can maybe have to do with globalization, but there are also other possible explanations, like technological change, for instance. It could also be that we didn't think carefully enough about policies that should accompany globalization to make it sort of, let's say, more to cushion some of the social repercussions of globalization. So I think there are no sort of easy answers, because I think while there is clearly a sort of drive to voice the concerns in the current U.S. administration, some of the worries about globalization are held in a bipartisan fashion. They might be expressed differently in different tonalities and through different media channels, but the concerns are actually, I think, held by both major parties, and they are also voiced in other countries. And I think this requires a debate as to why this is, and I don't think there is a single or short answer to that question.
Thank you.